Devon Larratt invented the wrist kickback. It completely disengages the opponent's cup as the kickback trades the cup for additional pronation. The kickback, in other words wrist extension, not only involves extending the wrist, it slips the skin of the fingers by rotating the hand while the opponent's hand is static. Spinning. Some wrist extensors contribute to radial deviation movement. So when kickbacking, you can rise easily and more fluently. It's a kind of reverse pronation. To execute this technique efficiently, you have to increase your reverse side pressure. It's a technique of pronation involving pronating with the pinky pad rather than thumb or knuckle. A little bit of wrist kickback allows more access to finger and pronation strength. Try gripping with your wrist slightly bent back versus flat. You'll see the bent wrist can generate more grip power. To understand this, try flexing your wrist fully and see how much you can rise. Then compare it with an extended wrist. When the wrist is extended, there's added room for radial deviation. When it's flexed, there's added room for ulnar deviation. Kicking back your wrist a bit in exchange for more pronation makes your opponent farther away from getting around your hand, and they waste more energy holding on to you while you're hitting hard outside and trying to get around and over. The kickback technique is super effective for those who have long fingers. Instead of giving all the cup, they just give away palm and finger flexion, not the entire hand. All muscles involved in finger extension cross the wrist joint and will also aid in wrist extension. The main difference is in which muscle is the main driver of the action for wrist extension. Although finger extensors do work, they are not the main muscles being worked and so will get a lot less benefit when compared to finger extension specific exercises. The kickback, wrist extension, helps in rising and regripping for a higher position, especially in denying a hook, where the opponent gives you free cup by supinating. By doing kickback, you're applying the rule number 3, never take what's given to you. Kickback will hinder someone's supination, which can really throw off their attack if they relied on supination to get inside. With that said, it's a really hard strength to use without just accidentally bending your wrist back too much and giving them a free top roll with shoulder commitment full cup. And as important as rising is, it effectively becomes inaccessible the more supinated your wrist is. So yeah, in theory, if you would want to max out one particular pressure, it'd be the ability to maintain your pronation from a neutral grip to a fully pronated grip. Devon's pronation lift is based on wrist extension. You should kick back the wrist. If you're not doing it, will be more of a back pressure lift than pronation. That's why so many people say their back pressure fails first, as they don't kick back the wrist.
Your thumb, engage your thumb,
yep.
and see my wrist, watch my wrist. See how it kicks back a little bit? Yeah. A little bit, and lean back, and bang. That's it, that's your lift.
So, a lot of times, people are coming just straight up in their post angle. A higher angle than just straight up is actually a little bit of kicking back of the wrist. Like you do most of your bell work, but this time it's with external rotation. So that should really, really hit some of these fingers that's trying to come at you and cup. Hope this helps.
If you kick back the wrist, it will target your pronation better. Riser strength is what stops your wrist from giving forward when posting into your opponent's fingers. Basically, what happens with a successful posting top roll is that you go back into your opponent's fingers, their fingers start to open up. You can then climb. By reaching your hand up higher on the opponent's hand and then slide your elbow forward to secure your arm in a more upright position, you've now climbed higher on the opponent's lever, and the rest is physics. It takes less force to bring their arm down the higher you are. Conversely, when you are containing someone who has started to post into your fingers, your riser is what stabilizes your wrist from dumping down, assuming you are containing their post with your fingers. So it's what stabilizes your wrist when you are posting or you are being posted against, aka the gateway to gaining or losing height. There are other elements where you use your riser, but I use this example both because I'm most familiar with it, and it's one of the situations when riser is coming into play most. If you want to top roll and can't assert riser, you must get your hand on top by cupping and forcing your opponent underneath you. Expressing pronation with a dumped riser and a flat wrist is really tough and usually will result in getting turned over through your hand instead. You can't really top roll someone by diving underneath them, and that's what you're doing if you can't turn them underneath you and can't rise above them. If you have a strong pronation and back pressure, take him to the straps and work there. The straps will protect your riser somewhat, so it won't dip as much, and you won't lose too much leverage as a result. Try to apply force through the strap as well, which will allow you to utilize back pressure more effectively. When the wrist is straight or cupped, back pressure fails, but when kicking back the wrist, pronation fails first. You really need to execute the lift perfectly to target your pronation, otherwise the lift won't help much. Most people's back pressure is way stronger than their pronation. The pronator muscle is very small, and there is no way it can be stronger than back pressure, which involves brachialis, biceps brachioradialis. The radius and ulnar bone rotation axis is much smaller than the elbow joint, so it takes less than 1/10 the force to lift the same weights. Also important to note that pronation is assisted by the brachioradialis, pronator teres, and pronator quadratus. It's not just one small tiny muscle. Any consistent arm wrestler who has somehow developed their pronation to be stronger than their back pressure has severely neglected their back pressure, and it's a weakness to be addressed. In theory, back pressure should obviously be a fair bit stronger, larger muscles, more muscles involved, and it's so useful that neglecting it to the extent your pronation outpaces it is just a blatantly missed opportunity. Even a little bit of dedicated back pressure training should keep it above your pronation, even if pronation is your priority. Being able to maintain your pronation unlocks all of the other offensive muscles and chains, posting pressure through elbow flexors and rise. In practice, though, it's really difficult to only rely on it, as there are many setup and stylistic situations where you'd want to have other strengths and technical know-how. Flop wrist is one example where the flopper is effectively side-stepping your hand and targeting your arm. This sport involves a lot of eccentric motion, so you want to keep a position. Concentric hypertrophy training will build the muscle, but won't really get you that eccentric strength. A combination of both would be best, leaning more into eccentric. Because in most cases, once you lose your hand, you really can't get it back. Doing high-intensity movements like Devon, for example, is what you should be doing in the peaking phase. That kind of training will help you use the muscle mass you already have to its fullest potential, but once you hit 100% of that potential, the only way to progress is to build more muscle, do hypertrophy-focused training.